What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Wednesday, July 7th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's MLB slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have an 8-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the pitcher position. I like Minnea with a 9% pitching advantage over the Houston Astros. Minnea is only giving up a .681 OPS versus lefties and a .687 OPS versus righties. He's facing 4 lefties and 4 righties, and on top of that, the Astros have only hit 39 of his last 156 pitches. So that's a .250 batting average and a super big sample size. So we got a great sample size there, and it looks to be a good pitcher versus batter matchup. Minnea is $9,200 FanDuel salary. He's $700 more on DraftKings. Now, he's only projected here at 18.8 fantasy points, but that looks awfully low. I think he can score at least 30 fantasy points in this one. He has an ERA of 3.13. Record is 6-5 on the season. Pitching an average of 93 pitches per game, averaging 33 fantasy points per game. He scored 21, 40, and 43 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Minnea here versus the Houston Astros. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I'm just going to go with a stud pick here. I like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. with a 17% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Matt Harvey. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., he's batting a .949 OPS versus righties, and Matt Harvey, he throws his worst ball versus righty batters, 16% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.116 OPS versus righties. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is 3 for 5, batting .600 with a 1.867 OPS versus Harvey. I think he's going to crush the ball against Matt Harvey here tonight. He's $4,600 FanDuel salary and $1,300 more on DraftKings. Projected at 10.3 fantasy points here tonight. I think he's going to score at least his season average, which is 15 fantasy points per game. And he scored 22, 6, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 10.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. here versus Matt Harvey. Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I'm going to give you a value play here. I like Tony Kemp with a 105% batting advantage over Luis Garcia. Tony Kemp is batting 42% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .759 OPS versus righties, and Luis Garcia, he throws his worst ball versus lefty batters. His worst ball by far to lefty batters, 63% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.015 OPS versus lefties. Tony Kemp is 1 for 3 with a 1.833 OPS versus Garcia because that one hit was for a home run. He's only $2,500 FanDuel salary. He's $900 more on DraftKings. Projected at 9.9 fantasy points here tonight. Now he's only averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 0, 3, and 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games. But I think he makes a nice value play here tonight, so I like Tony Kemp here versus Luis Garcia. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Manny Machado with a 19% batting advantage over Patrick Corbin. Manny Machado is batting a .862 OPS versus lefties. And Patrick Corbin, he throws 22% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .869 OPS versus righties. Manny Machado is 3 for 11, batting a .273 batting average and a .818 OPS versus Corbin. One of those 3 hits is for a home run. He's $4,000 FanDuel salary, and he's $1,300 more on DraftKings. He's projected at 11.3 fantasy points here tonight. He's averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 28, 9, and 60 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Manny Machado here versus Patrick Corbin. Now, the other guy that I liked here, he's only $200 salary less, so I think I'd rather spend the $200 and pay up for Manny Machado. But the other guy that I had my eye on was Nolan Aronado with a 17% batting advantage over Alex Wood. Nolan Arenado, he bats 6% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .828 OPS versus lefties. And Alex Wood throws his worst ball versus righty batters, 12% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .865 OPS versus righties. Now, Nolan Arenado is 5 for 25, so that's only a 200 batting average and a .750 OPS versus Wood. But what I did like about this pick is that 2 of those 5 hits were for home runs. He's $3,800 FanDuel salary. He's $1,600 more on DraftKings. Projected at 11.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 37 and 13 fantasy points in his last 2 games. So I like Nolan Arenado here versus Alex Wood.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the shortstop position. I like Brandon Crawford with a 9% batting advantage over Johan Ovidio. That's definitely not right. Oviedo. Yeah, Johan Oviedo. Brandon Crawford is batting 23% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .890 OPS versus righties. And Johan Oviedo, he's giving up a .710 OPS versus lefties. Now, he does pitch his best ball versus lefty batters, and there's no at-bats versus Oviedo yet. And Brandon Crawford is $3,300 FanDuel salary and $1,900 more on DraftKings. Projected at 9.5 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 26, 3, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Brandon Crawford here versus Johan Oviedo. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. I like Bryce Harper with a 36% batting advantage over Alec Mills. Bryce Harper, he's batting 10% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .968 OPS versus righties. And Alec Mills, he pitches 27% worse to lefties as he does righties, giving up a .840 OPS versus lefties. Bryce Harper is 2 for 2 with a 3.5 OPS versus Mills. One of those hits is for a home run. He's $3,800 FanDuel salary, and he's $800 more on DraftKings. Projected at 12.5 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 47 and 15 fantasy points in the last 2 games.
So I like Bryce Harper here versus Alec Mills. Oh, and I just caught this play here. I like George Springer with a 40% batting advantage over the low salary pitcher Matt Harvey. George Springer, he's batting 24% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .943 OPS versus righties. And Matt Harvey throws his worst ball versus righty batters, 16% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.116 OPS versus righties. George Springer is 5 for 10, batting .500 with a 1.983 OPS versus Harvey. 3 of those 5 hits were for home runs. He's $3,700 FanDuel salary, $1,100 more on DraftKings, projected at 11 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 0, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 10.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So George Springer has pretty much everything going for him here tonight. Might be one of my favorite plays on the slate. So I like George Springer here versus Matt Harvey. Now I'm going to give you a value play here. Take a look at Will Myers with a 20% batting advantage over Patrick Corbin. Will Myers is batting a .829 OPS versus lefties, and Patrick Corbin, he throws 22% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .869 OPS versus righties. And I like this pick because Will Myers is 11 for 30 with a .367 batting average and a 1.105 OPS versus Corbin. So that's a huge sample size, a nice batter versus pitcher matchup here. And Will Myers is only $2,300 FanDuel salary. He's $1,200 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.5 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season, but he scored 39 and 19 fantasy points in the last 2 games. So I like Will Myers here versus Patrick Corbin.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.